in the mirror. With bumps all over her face, she did not even look like herself. That one eye was protruding. Something was wrong with it. Then the most amazing thing happened. God poured out so much love on her that she could feel nothing but love for the person who had beaten her. Who was that person, Joshua? Are you not listening? Do I need to start over? I'm not. Yeah. I figured everybody else would know.
I thought you meant to name. Not the person.
The Lord said, you got just a small taste of how I felt as I hung on the cross and said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. This is a love that is more than any human love. Their church did not have a pastor at this time. One Sunday, the congregation was thrilled when a visiting preacher had come by. Oh, wonderful, we will get a sermon today, the congregation thought. In the middle of the service, Edith felt like she should go to the altar, and she went. After all, the saints had told her to do whatever she felt like doing. The people of the church gathered around Edith at the altar and began to pray. God wonderfully helped. After a few minutes, Edith couldn't pray anymore. Everyone sat in silence for a couple of minutes. The devil told one of the women, Sister Land, that she might as well go back to her seat and let the preacher preach. But God said, this one soul is worth more than the preaching. So she started praying hard, and God came. Edith did not remember getting up from the altar, but when she came to herself, she was running back and forth across the front, shouting, Glory! Glory! She tried to say it quietly, but it seemed that it was so loud that you could hear her several blocks away. The glory just rolled out. She found out why they shouted. It changed her life. After that, she never doubted that this was the way to heaven. After Edith got saved, she loved to get with the other women from the church to pray. Once, as she and Jackie were praying, Tom was listening to them from the other room. Later, he told her, I believe that if I couldn't pray any better than that, I'd just quit. But Edith couldn't quit. She had found a friend that she could go to about everything in her life.
Yes.
She was surprised when she found God helping her in even small ways. She and Jackie decided to go see a woman in the church who was sick. This same woman later saw angels around her bed as she lay dying. They had a wonderful time visiting this godly woman. When they left the woman's house, they were planning to take the bus back home since they lived across town and they both had several children. Look, one of them called out, the bus is already at the corner. Should we run? No, there's no way we can make it, the other answered. It's 2 blocks away. They would just have to walk clear across town with their young children. To their surprise, the bus did not drive away, but stayed on the corner as they all walked the 2 blocks calmly. When they got on the bus, they asked the driver, why did you wait for us? There's no way you knew that we were going to ride, he said. I just had a strange feeling that I should wait. As Edith learned to lean on God, Tom kept drinking. When he was not drunk, he was a nice man, but once he was drunk, he would be violent and mean. Edith felt like there was no way she could leave him. He told her, if you leave, I'll be sending all of you and your parents back in a box. She felt he was very capable of killing her, and she was scared to leave him. On one occasion, Tom and Edith had just stopped at Tom's mother's house. Tom was drunk and mad at Edith. Edith, get in the car, Tom ordered. Edith got in the car, her heart pounding wildly. Why does he want me in the car, she worried. Edith, Tom slurred, I'm going to ram this car into that brick wall at the end of the street. Edith did not say anything out loud, but in her heart she was praying hard, and God was listening. Tom put the key in the ignition and tried to start the car. It would not start.
Amen.
He tried and tried to start it, but that car would not start. They had just driven up in this car, and nothing had been wrong with it a few minutes before. Tom jumped out of the car and slammed the door. As he walked up the street, his brother heard him say, you and Jackie aren't just witches anyway. Tom was drafted into the Army in 1948 and was stationed in El Paso, Texas. This helped keep him under more control when he was drinking. Edith and the children were living with Tom's parents. One evening, Tom called. Edith, he said, I want you to come on the next bus to El Paso. When Edith got off the phone, she and her mother-in-law talked about what she should do. Finally, they agreed that Edith should probably go if Tom told her to go. The children could stay there with Tom's mom. The only thing that worried the women was that if Tom decided to leave and come back to Kansas, Edith would be in trouble. She only had enough money to get to Texas and none to come back. When the women of the church learned that Edith was planning, that she was planning on leaving that morning on the 8 o'clock bus for Texas, they gathered at 6 o'clock that morning for a prayer meeting. God helped the women pray. Edith, they said, God says you are not supposed to go. Edith looked up perplexed. She said, but I did not feel God tell me anything. Well, they answered, then we'll just pray again that God will show you. Once again, the women gathered around Edith and began to bombard the throne of God. Like a flash, Edith knew for herself. God made it plain to her heart that she was not to go to Texas. She sat there trembling. How mad will Tom be when I don't show up? She asked herself. She drew a promise from the promise box. It said, Psalm 121:7, the Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. With confidence, she told her friend Faye, God is going to take care of me. I'm in his hands. All the trembling was gone. The next morning, about 11 o'clock, the phone rang. Edith, Tom said anxiously, is that you? Edith answered, yes, it's me. I didn't leave. Oh, wonderful, I'm so glad. Tom breathed a sigh of relief. He had sobered up and realized what he had done. He had no money to send her home and no place for her to stay. It would have been a disaster if she would have gone to Texas and Tom had been too drunk to realize it. Eventually, Edith and the children moved down to El Paso, Texas with Tom. Once the family was stopped at the top of a hill. In a drunken fit, Tom made Edith go down the hill to some water where he tried to drown her.
Oh my.
The children were left in the car at the top to watch. Carol was 5 years old at the time, and she was traumatized. She began having nightmares every night that her dad was trying to drown her mom. This little girl would wake up trembling in the darkness of her room.
Sad.
She did not know what to do. She could not tell her mom and dad because it was about them. For the first time in her life, Carol took this to God. Jesus, please help me never to have these nightmares again. God looked down and saw a little girl who could not do anything about her situation. He performed a miracle and took these horrible dreams away. She never had them again.
Amen.
Even though she was only 5, she knew that God had answered that prayer just for her. God was real. Tom served in the Korean War in the 1950s. When he returned, he received orders to go to Fort Lewis and Tacoma, Washington. The family loaded up to make the long, tiresome trip. The trip took even longer since Tom would stop all too often at yet another beer joint. Edith and the children would wait in the car while Tom went into the bar to drink. With the windows rolled down, it was hot, dusty, and miserable. Tom would drive the car in the mornings, and the more he drank, the faster he drove. By noon, he would have Edith drive, and by that point, she was happy to have the wheel. When he was drinking, every little thing made him mad. As they were in the mountains of Northern California, they stopped for gas. The worker at the gas station did not shut the car hood completely.
No.
They were driving up the mountain when the hood flew up. Edith, what are you doing? Tom screamed with rage. He felt like it was her fault since she was the one driving. Pull over. I'm taking over the driving. Edith cringed as she got in the passenger seat. Tom whipped the car back onto the road. Barreling down the road, he started weaving in and out of the lane. They were pulling a one-wheel trailer loaded heavily with all their possessions and passing everything on the road. Edith's knuckles were white as she clutched the seat. Fear in their eyes, none of the children made a sound. Tom would just barely manage to get back in the right lane and avoid hitting the oncoming traffic. They came to a town where Tom slowed for a stop sign. All at once, they saw the flashing lights of the police. And that's where we'll end.